Hi there, Lindsay here, the Frugal Crafter. Today we're going to make this fun Christmas tree decoration using a kit from our sponsor, topflightstamps.com. I'll have a link to this project kit as well as a coupon code in the video description, so make sure you check it out. Top Flight Stamps brings us the coolest projects and stamps from all over the world to us here in the United States, and they offer free shipping on USA orders over 50, so lots of fun things to find there and good deals too. So this is a kit that comes with pretty much everything you need, but I am going to put my own spin on things as well. But just keep in mind that you can just use the kit as is if you don't want to add any other embellishments or bits and bobs. This is a very basic kit, and I think it would be fun for all skill levels. Now I am going to go through some issues that I had during the assembly of this kit, so hopefully you won't have these issues if you decide to do it at home. So one of the things I wanted to do was I wanted to have the edges of my project match the pattern paper. So I went ahead and used some kind of pale blue chalk paint to paint the edges and the base, just so that you wouldn't see that brown. You could totally do this after the fact, I think, especially if your paint was pretty close to matching, and it might make things go together easier, and I'll get to that in a little bit. I traced all the shapes onto the pattern paper so that I could cut that out before I go ahead and glue it. I think it would be difficult to glue it down and then cut it out. I think it's a little bit easier to do it this way. And make sure you trace the slots as well, and make sure you cut the slots a little bit bigger than they are. And for the outlines of the paper, you want to cut it in a little bit so it's a little bit smaller. Having those edges painted though, it's going to make it look really nice. If you did cut it a little big and you weren't painting the edges, you could use an emery board or a piece of sandpaper to sand off the excess, but like I mentioned before, I didn't want to. I wanted the edges to be blue, so I just made sure I cut it a little bit bigger. After you cut everything out, you're going to need to glue the papers down to the MDF pieces. Now, I am using Yes Paste, which is a glue that I tend to use anytime I need to cover like a large area, such as like a book page, like if I'm recovering an album or something like that, because the Yes Paste does not dry quickly, so I can shift stuff around. So I usually kind of spackle it on with an old credit card or a palette knife like this, and then I press my paper to it, and I can lift it up and shift it and move it if I need to. The issue that I had with this project using Yes Paste, and why I don't recommend it, is that I think that because it's a little bit thicker, it makes it so things don't go together very well. The other thing I want to warn you about working with like a project like this with the MDF board, you want to be careful that you don't drop your pieces or set something heavy on top of it. You can snap off tiny details. So like I did on the tip of that branch, it had snapped off. So just be careful you don't drop it or anything like that, because it's not as strong as wood. It's an MDF, which is like a pressed wood, almost like a really dense cardboard. So you just want to be aware of that. Also, when you're doing your gluing, you want to make sure that you clear any excess glue from the slots. Otherwise, you're going to have a difficult time when you go to assemble it. And once you have your pieces together, I would actually recommend you let them dry, because I think that my paste actually swelled the MDF a little bit and made it difficult for me to get the pieces together. So if you were to let it dry completely and then use like an emery board or a file, you could file out that middle slot if you notice that it's a tight fit. I forced it together while the glue was still wet, and then I couldn't get it apart again, so I had to actually use a craft knife to trim off a little bit of the trunk so that I could get it to fit in the slots enough that I could glue it. So, just be aware of that. Let me make the mistake so that you don't have to. Now, I wanted to have some three-dimensional critters here. I wanted some woodland critters, but I couldn't find any. The dollar store did have these farm animals, so I figured that I could use like the goat and the ram and the sheep. They would look all right. And I figured I could turn one of these horses into deer using a little bit of hot glue and some scissors. So I cut down the tail and twisted it so it kind of poked up like a deer tail. And then I made some ears out of hot glue, and I glued them over the deer's ears. And then I just painted all of my critters with that same blue chalk paint so that it would have a continuity in the design, and then I just let them dry. I'm using the punch outs from the kit. Now the kit does come with a whole sheet of beautiful decorations. Like I mentioned before, you can do this whole project with the papers and the punch outs that are provided. If you don't have to add anything else. I just like to customize my projects a little bit more, especially for a tutorial, because you can look at the picture on the package just as well as anybody else and recreate that, no problem. But I wanted to give some different ideas if you had picked up this kit and you wanted some different ideas for it. I used hot glue mainly because I'd had some frustrations with the paste for gluing these little punch outs down, and I knew that would be a little bit quicker. I had the most trouble with my hot glue gun with this project, and I'm not exactly sure why, but I feel like at every opportunity I was burning my fingers. Maybe because this paper is kind of thin, and I probably shouldn't be using hot glue for it. Now, as far as other things I wanted to add to this that weren't in the kit, I used this thin tinsel that I got a couple years ago at the Dollar Tree. They sell this every year. I like it because it's so small and sparkly. It's really pretty on cards and making little ornaments and things. It's such a dainty product that I use it a lot, and you get a lot in one little container, so I'm still using the stuff I bought a few years ago. Now I'm going to glue in these little animals. The paint isn't completely dry, but that's all right because I can touch it up once everything's glued down. And I tried applying hot glue to the little figurines and then sticking that down, and then I also tried putting the glue on the base and then sticking the figurines into it, and I think that worked a little bit better because the glue wants to almost melt the legs of the figurines a little bit, so you got to be a little careful there. And then I touched up any blue paint that I needed to on the figurines and on the edges of the tree, and sprinkled it with glitter so it would stick to the wet paint and have a little bit of a snowy look. And that's just clear iridescent glitter. You can use any brand. That happens to be by Arteza, but any brand is fine. And then I took the animal punch outs and the little pine cone punch outs from the kit, and I glued them around the edge of the base so that they would kind of have almost like a diorama effect. The only problem with this, like gluing little papers on the edge, is that you're going to have to be careful not to bend them because they are just a paper, and they could definitely get crushed in storage and stuff. So I think if I had to do this project again, what I would end up doing is I probably wouldn't use the papers and the punch outs. I probably would put it together and paint it, and like paint on some ornaments, and then maybe drape a little bit of garland or a metallic thread or something just to make it a little more customizable. Now, since I used hot glue, I did have a lot of hot glue strings, so I used my heat tool, just blasted it for a minute, and it like makes the hot glue strings disappear. So it's a really good tip if you like to use hot glue. And there it is, all finished. I think it came out pretty cute, even though I had some frustrations making the project, but hopefully you won't, because you've heard the ways to overcome it. Please check out our sponsor, topflightstamps.com, if you would like to find this project. They have a lot of beautiful stamps from all over the world too, so even if that's not your cup of tea, I'm sure you'll find something that is. Please give me a thumbs up if you enjoyed this. Until next time, happy crafting.